A journey within, redefining success with every step we take, with every decision we face. Life invites us to discover a purpose that goes beyond the surface. It is a journey within, where faith, resilience, and the power of our abilities become our compass. On this path, success is not only what we achieve, but what we build within ourselves and what we share with the world. Your own path starts here. Are you ready to embrace your purpose and walk toward a more fulfilling and meaningful life? Immerse yourself in this journey of transformation. If this message has inspired you, don't miss the opportunity to delve deeper into more wisdom. Subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment about what resonated with you most. And like the video so that this light may reach more people. The spiritual golden key, improving. Through your relationship with money and your finances, author, Unknown Money. As a tool beyond obsession, I remember the first time I felt drawn to the idea of having more money. I was young, inexperienced, and convinced that money would solve all my problems. I saw it as a symbol of success, a shield against the fears that had always accompanied me. But is money truly the answer to everything, or can it become a mirage that distracts us from what truly matters? It was a quiet afternoon when a close friend, someone I considered a mentor, asked me a question that resonated deeply. If tomorrow you had all the money you ever desired, what would change in your life? I fell silent. The first thing that came to mind was an endless list of material things. A bigger house, a more luxurious car, trips around the world. But after thinking about it more, I understood that those things wouldn't solve what truly worried me. Money was just a means, but I was treating it as an end. That conversation led me to reflect. What is the value of money if you don't know what you need it for? I asked myself. It was a simple question, but it led me down a path that changed my relationship with it forever. As I delved into my thoughts, I began to recall moments in my life when money was not enough. There were days when, despite having a stable bank account, I felt an inexplicable emptiness. How could this be? How was it possible to have everything and still feel like something was missing? The answer was right in front of me. Money could not fill the space that belongs to purpose. There was a time when I worked long hours, sacrificing time with my family and friends, chasing financial goals that, in retrospect, were hollow. One day, my young son looked at me and said, "Dad, why are you always working? Is that more important than being with us?" Those words stayed with me. I realized that I was building a sandcastle that would crumble with the first wave. A mentor once shared a metaphor with me that transformed my perspective. Money is like a stream of water. If you don't learn how to direct it, it can erode everything in its path. But if you know how to build the right channels, that same stream can nourish and give life to everything you touch. So the question became clear. Am I building channels? Or am I letting money control me? That question led me to make radical decisions. I began to reevaluate my priorities. I stopped seeking accumulation and started focusing on creation. I stopped measuring my success by the amount in my bank account and began to measure it by the impact I had on the lives of others. But I want to be honest with you. This change was not easy. There were days when I doubted, days when I was tempted to return to the old mindset that more is better. Then I forced myself to remember a fundamental lesson. Money is a tool, and like any tool, its value lies in how we use it, not in how much we have. How are you using the money you have now? I repeatedly asked myself, and I ask you the same question, because no matter how much you have, what's important is how you use it to build a meaningful life. Money can be a powerful ally, but it should never be your master. I understood that money doesn't define who you are, but how you use it can reveal a lot about you. It can be a bridge to your dreams or a barrier that separates you from them. It all depends on your perspective. What story does your relationship with money tell? Are you using it as a tool, or have you become its prisoner? This chapter is not about giving up money, but about giving it its proper place in your life. It's about recognizing that it's not the destination, but the vehicle. Because when you understand this, money stops being an obsession and becomes a means to build something bigger, life aligned with your values, your dreams, and your purpose. This is just one part of our journey together. In the next chapter, we will discover how to build an abundance mindset that will transform not only your relationship with money, but with yourself, because true change begins from within. Are you ready to take the next step? Money is a tool. Beyond obsession, I remember a day when everything seemed to be in its place, at least from the outside. My career was on the rise, the financial goals I had set were being met one after another, and those around me saw me as successful. However, inside me, there was an emptiness I couldn't ignore. How could I feel dissatisfied when I seemed to have it all? That question was the starting point of a journey that changed not only my life but also the way I see money. That afternoon, while looking at the numbers in my bank account, I stopped and asked myself, why am I doing this? What am I really hoping to achieve? For a long time, I had believed that accumulating wealth would give me peace. But the more I had, the further I seemed to be from that sense of fulfillment I so longed for. In those days, I had a conversation that was etched in my memory. A colleague, someone I admired deeply, told me, money is neither good nor bad. It is neutral. It's a tool, like a hammer. You can use it to build or to destroy. It depends on you. His words were simple, but resonated deeply. Until that moment, I had treated money as an end in itself, forgetting that it was only a means to something greater. I was left thinking, am I building or destroying with my relationship with money? And the truth was that although I had built financial stability, I had also destroyed something essential: time with my family, moments of genuine connection, and most importantly, my purpose. It was then that I decided to change my approach. I realized that the problem wasn't money itself, but how I related to it. I had allowed it to become an obsession instead of seeing it as an ally. Have you ever asked yourself if your relationship with money is bringing you closer to or moving you away from the life you truly desire? I began to observe the small decisions I made every day. Was I working late because I wanted to build something meaningful, or because I feared not having enough? Was I spending money on things I truly valued, or was I just trying to fill an emotional void? It was uncomfortable to face these questions, but it was necessary. I remember one morning in particular. I was having breakfast with my young daughter. She asked me with that sincerity that only children have, "Dad, why are you always working? Is it because you need more money?" Her question hit me hard. What example was I setting? What values was I transmitting to her? That conversation was a turning point. I understood that money should not be an obstacle between the people I love and me. I decided that my success would not be measured only by how much money I could accumulate, but by how that money could improve my life and the lives of those around me. Little by little, I began to redefine my priorities. I stopped seeking external validation through financial achievements and focused on building a life that truly had meaning. But that didn't mean giving up on money. On the contrary, it meant using it consciously as the powerful tool it has always been. What decisions would you make if you started seeing money this way? Then another question arose. If money doesn't define who I am, but can influence what I do, how can I use it to serve a greater purpose? The journey has not been easy. It requires discipline, self-knowledge, and above all, honesty. But as I moved forward, I discovered that the true power of money lies not in how much you have, but in how you use it to align your life with your deepest values and aspirations. I still remember the days when I ran after every opportunity without stopping to think if it was really worth it. Today, instead, I stop and ask myself, is this financial decision building or eroding my purpose? And that question has changed everything. Asterisk, as I explored this new way of thinking, I realized something. Our relationship with money is deeply influenced by the stories we tell ourselves about it. We grow up with beliefs often unconscious, shape how we see and use it. Money is the root of all evil. Money doesn't buy happiness, or even more money means more success. How many times have you heard these phrases? Oh, how many times have you accepted them as truths without questioning them? I stopped to reflect on the stories I myself had believed for years. I remembered how in my childhood, money was synonymous with worry. My parents worked tirelessly to make sure we had what we needed, but something always seemed to be missing. That feeling of scarcity was etched in me, and without me realizing it, led to money becoming an obsession later in my life. A journey within, redefining success with every step we take. With every decision we face, life invites us to discover a purpose that goes beyond the surface. It is a journey within, where faith, resilience, and the power of our abilities become our compass. On this path, success is not only what we achieve, but what we build within ourselves and what we share with the world. Your own path starts here. Are you ready to embrace your purpose and walk toward a more fulfilling and meaningful life? Immerse yourself in this journey of transformation. If this message has inspired you, don't miss the opportunity to delve deeper into more wisdom. Subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment about what resonated with you most. And like the video so that this light may reach more people. The spiritual golden key, improving. Through your relationship with money and your finances, author, Unknown Money. As a tool beyond obsession, I remember the first time I felt drawn to the idea of having more money. I was young, inexperienced, and convinced that money would solve all my problems. I saw it as a symbol of success, a shield against the fears that had always accompanied me. But is money truly the answer to everything, or can it become a mirage that distracts us from what truly matters? It was a quiet afternoon when a close friend, someone I considered a mentor, asked me a question that resonated deeply. If tomorrow you had all the money you ever desired, what would change in your life? I fell silent. The first thing that came to mind was an endless list of material things. A bigger house, a more luxurious car, trips around the world. But after thinking about it more, I understood that those things wouldn't solve what truly worried me. Money was just a means, but I was treating it as an end. That conversation led me to reflect. What is the value of money if you don't know what you need it for? I asked myself. It was a simple question, but it led me down a path that changed my relationship with it forever. As I delved into my thoughts, I began to recall moments in my life when money was not enough. There were days when, despite having a stable bank account, I felt an inexplicable emptiness. How could this be? How was it possible to have everything and still feel like something was missing? The answer was right in front of me. Money could not fill the space that belongs to purpose. There was a time when I worked long hours, sacrificing time with my family and friends, chasing financial goals that, in retrospect, were hollow. One day, my young son looked at me and said, "Dad, why are you always working? Is that more important than being with us?" Those words stayed with me. I realized that I was building a sandcastle that would crumble with the first wave. A mentor once shared a metaphor with me that transformed my perspective. Money is like a stream of water. If you don't learn how to direct it, it can erode everything in its path. But if you know how to build the right channels, that same stream can nourish and give life to everything you touch. So the question became clear. Am I building channels? Or am I letting money control me? That question led me to make radical decisions. I began to reevaluate my priorities. I stopped seeking accumulation and started focusing on creation. I stopped measuring my success by the amount in my bank account and began to measure it by the impact I had on the lives of others. But I want to be honest with you. This change was not easy. There were days when I doubted, days when I was tempted to return to the old mindset that more is better. Then I forced myself to remember a fundamental lesson. Money is a tool, and like any tool, its value lies in how we use it, not in how much we have. How are you using the money you have now? I repeatedly asked myself, and I ask you the same question, because no matter how much you have, what's important is how you use it to build a meaningful life. Money can be a powerful ally, but it should never be your master. I understood that money doesn't define who you are, but how you use it can reveal a lot about you. It can be a bridge to your dreams or a barrier that separates you from them. It all depends on your perspective. What story does your relationship with money tell? Are you using it as a tool, or have you become its prisoner? This chapter is not about giving up money, but about giving it its proper place in your life. It's about recognizing that it's not the destination, but the vehicle. Because when you understand this, money stops being an obsession and becomes a means to build something bigger, life aligned with your values, your dreams, and your purpose. This is just one part of our journey together. In the next chapter, we will discover how to build an abundance mindset that will transform not only your relationship with money, but with yourself, because true change begins from within. Are you ready to take the next step? Money is a tool. Beyond obsession, I remember a day when everything seemed to be in its place, at least from the outside. My career was on the rise, the financial goals I had set were being met one after another, and those around me saw me as successful. However, inside me, there was an emptiness I couldn't ignore. How could I feel dissatisfied when I seemed to have it all? That question was the starting point of a journey that changed not only my life but also the way I see money. That afternoon, while looking at the numbers in my bank account, I stopped and asked myself, why am I doing this? What am I really hoping to achieve? For a long time, I had believed that accumulating wealth would give me peace. But the more I had, the further I seemed to be from that sense of fulfillment I so longed for. In those days, I had a conversation that was etched in my memory. A colleague, someone I admired deeply, told me, money is neither good nor bad. It is neutral. It's a tool, like a hammer. You can use it to build or to destroy. It depends on you. His words were simple, but resonated deeply. Until that moment, I had treated money as an end in itself, forgetting that it was only a means to something greater. I was left thinking, am I building or destroying with my relationship with money? And the truth was that although I had built financial stability, I had also destroyed something essential: time with my family, moments of genuine connection, and most importantly, my purpose. It was then that I decided to change my approach. I realized that the problem wasn't money itself, but how I related to it. I had allowed it to become an obsession instead of seeing it as an ally. Have you ever asked yourself if your relationship with money is bringing you closer to or moving you away from the life you truly desire? I began to observe the small decisions I made every day. Was I working late because I wanted to build something meaningful, or because I feared not having enough? Was I spending money on things I truly valued, or was I just trying to fill an emotional void? It was uncomfortable to face these questions, but it was necessary. I remember one morning in particular. I was having breakfast with my young daughter. She asked me with that sincerity that only children have, "Dad, why are you always working? Is it because you need more money?" Her question hit me hard. What example was I setting? What values was I transmitting to her? That conversation was a turning point. I understood that money should not be an obstacle between the people I love and me. I decided that my success would not be measured only by how much money I could accumulate, but by how that money could improve my life and the lives of those around me. Little by little, I began to redefine my priorities. I stopped seeking external validation through financial achievements and focused on building a life that truly had meaning. But that didn't mean giving up on money. On the contrary, it meant using it consciously as the powerful tool it has always been. What decisions would you make if you started seeing money this way? Then another question arose. If money doesn't define who I am, but can influence what I do, how can I use it to serve a greater purpose? The journey has not been easy. It requires discipline, self-knowledge, and above all, honesty. But as I moved forward, I discovered that the true power of money lies not in how much you have, but in how you use it to align your life with your deepest values and aspirations. I still remember the days when I ran after every opportunity without stopping to think if it was really worth it. Today, instead, I stop and ask myself, is this financial decision building or eroding my purpose? And that question has changed everything. Asterisk, as I explored this new way of thinking, I realized something. Our relationship with money is deeply influenced by the stories we tell ourselves about it. Grow up with beliefs often unconscious. Shape how we see and use it. Money is the root of all evil. Money doesn't buy happiness, or even more money means more success. How many times have you heard these phrases? How many times have you accepted them as truths without questioning them? I stopped to reflect on the stories I myself had believed for years. I remembered how in my childhood, money was synonymous with worry. My parents worked tirelessly to make sure we had what we needed, but something always seemed to be missing. That feeling of scarcity was etched in me, and without me realizing it, led to money becoming an obsession later in my life. I was in the middle of a conference, surrounded by people who admired my work and sought advice. A woman raised her hand and asked me a question that left me speechless. Why does it seem easier to give than to receive? In that instant, a wave of memories and emotions flooded me. How many times had I rejected a compliment, a kind gesture, even an opportunity for fear of seeming needy or weak? How many times had I put up barriers to the abundance that others were trying to share with me? At the end of the conference, I found myself reflecting in silence. I realized that there was something deeply ingrained in me, a belief that receiving made me vulnerable, that accepting something from others was an act of selfishness or dependence. But was that true, or was it just a wall I had built to protect myself from something I didn't understand? That night, while writing in my journal, I faced an uncomfortable question. Why do I fear receiving? It was a question that challenged me to explore parts of myself that I preferred to avoid. And yet in the discomfort of that introspection, I began to find clarity. I remember a moment from my childhood that deeply marked me. I had received a gift from a relative, something small but significant. Instead of feeling grateful, I felt a strange mix of shame and responsibility, as if I were now in debt. That feeling accompanied me for years, infiltrating my adult life and shaping my relationship with abundance. I realized that it wasn't the act of receiving that made me uncomfortable, but the belief that accepting something implied an obligation to give it back. As I reflected on this, I realized that many people live with this same paradox. We want abundance, but we unconsciously reject it. We want to receive, but we feel uncomfortable when we do. So I asked myself, how can you expect to receive more from life if you're not willing to accept what it already offers you? The answer began to take shape through small daily experiences. A friend invited me to lunch, and instead of insisting on paying the bill, I simply accepted his gesture with gratitude. A colleague congratulated me on an achievement, and instead of downplaying it, I sincerely thanked him. I discovered that learning to receive is not only an act of humility, but also of trust. Trust that you deserve what comes into your life. Trust that accepting doesn't diminish your value. And trust that abundance is not a limited resource. But here's the paradox. You cannot truly give if you don't know how to receive, because giving and receiving are two sides of the same coin. If you reject what others offer you, how can you expect your generosity to be fully received? This realization changed my perspective. I understood that every time you receive with gratitude, you are allowing abundance to flow not only toward you, but also toward others. I began to practice generosity not only in giving, but also in receiving. I asked myself, what opportunities am I rejecting because I don't know how to receive them? What blessings am I ignoring because they don't fit into the idea I have of how abundance should be? These questions opened my eyes to a new way of seeing life, a way that allowed me to embrace both what I gave and what I received in this process. I realized something even deeper. Life itself is an act of receiving. We receive the air we breathe, the sun that warms our skin, the laughter of those we love. And yet we often take these things for granted, forgetting that each day is a gift in itself. What would happen if we lived each day with the intention of receiving everything that life offers us, great and small blessings alike? Abundance is not just a matter of material wealth. It is a matter of mindset, of being open to all the good that life has to offer, without fear, without resistance. And as we open our hearts to receive, we discover that abundance has no limits. Only we can put up barriers. Are you ready to tear them down? Building capacities? The art of managing blessings. There was a moment in my life when I felt completely overwhelmed by what I had asked for. I remember standing in front of my desk with a mountain of tasks, opportunities, and accumulated responsibilities. I had worked hard, I had prayed with purpose, and finally, things were starting to bear fruit. Of course. Here is the translation of the final sections of the text you provided. Building capacities, the art of managing blessings, but there was something I wasn't expecting. The feeling that I wasn't prepared to handle what I had received. That night, after a long day, I sat in silence and reflected. Is it possible to ask for something without being ready to receive it? What happens when blessings arrive before you have the capacity to manage them? These questions led me to explore a truth I had been ignoring. Success depends not only on what you receive, but on what you do with it. In a conversation with a mentor I deeply admired, shared my frustration. I feel like I'm losing control. I told him. He looked at me calmly and responded with something I will never forget. Life will always give you more than you can handle, but not to crush you, but to expand you. Your capacity grows at the pace of your blessings, but only if you're willing to learn. That moment marked a turning point in how I saw things. I realized that managing blessings is not just a practical act, but an art. It requires patience, focus, and, above all, the willingness to learn from every challenge. Shortly after, I began to observe how I reacted to the opportunities that came into my life. Many times, without realizing it, I had wasted blessings because I didn't know how to handle them. For example, in my early working years, I received an incredible opportunity, but instead of preparing myself to take advantage of it, I got carried away by insecurity and fear of failure. That experience taught me an important lesson. Blessings don't guarantee success. Your capacity to manage them does. From then on, I made a promise to myself. Every time I received something I had asked, for I would stop to reflect, I would ask myself, am I ready for this? If not, what do I need to learn to be? Because blessings don't always arrive as we think they will. Sometimes they come disguised as challenges that force us to grow. One day, a close friend told me something that resonated deeply. Life gives you what you can handle, but it always challenges you to grow a little beyond your comfort zone. I remembered how I had faced situations that seemed impossible at the time, but that, upon overcoming them, had left me with a greater capacity than I had before. I understood that the key was not to avoid those moments, but to embrace them as part of the process. But how do you build capacities? How do you learn to manage what seems uncontrollable? The answer began to form in small steps. I started to divide each challenge into more manageable parts, to seek mentorship, to surround myself with people who had already walked similar paths. What can I learn from this experience? I constantly asked myself. And little by little, I realized that every challenge was not an obstacle, but an opportunity to expand my limits. I also understood that managing blessings is not just about practical skills like organizing your time or prioritizing tasks, though these are important, also about the mindset with which you face those blessings. If you see them as a burden, you will feel overwhelmed. But if you see them as an opportunity to grow, every challenge becomes a stepping stone towards something bigger. I remember a project I took on at a time when I felt I couldn't handle anything more. It was a risk, and frankly, I was terrified of failing. But instead of rejecting it, I decided to face it with a different mindset. I told myself, this is what you asked for. Now's the time to show that you're ready. That change in perspective changed everything. Not only did I manage to complete the project, but I realized I was much more capable than I thought. I reflected on these experiences. I realized something even deeper. The art of managing blessings also involves gratitude. Because when you appreciate what you have, you develop a deeper connection with it. You become a more conscious, more responsible manager, and in that process, your capacity expands in ways you never imagined. But I want to leave you with a question. What are you doing today to manage the blessings you already have? How are you preparing yourself to handle those that are yet to come? Because life will always be willing to give you more. But first it needs to know if you're ready. Are you? Between crises and miracles, the wisdom of challenge there was a moment in my life when it seemed like everything was falling apart. The goals I had pursued for years vanished, opportunities closed, and the people I trusted began to pull away. I felt as if I were trapped in an endless storm, struggling to stay afloat. In those dark days, the question that constantly haunted me was, why now? Why me? I remember one particular night, sitting the next morning while walking in the park, a thought struck me like lightning. Crises don't come to destroy you, they come to transform you. It was then that I decided to stop running from the pain and start exploring it. I wanted to understand why I was going through such a difficult time and, more importantly, what I could build from it. It was not an immediate process. In the days that followed, I found myself facing small epiphanies that began to change my perspective. One of them came from a conversation with a friend, someone who had faced challenges even greater than mine. He told me something that was etched in my mind. In every crisis, there is a hidden miracle, but you will only see it if you are willing to look for it.
Oh.
Those words made me reflect. How many times in my life had I gone through difficult situations, only to realize later that those moments had prepared me for something better? I began to remember all the times that life seemed to close one door on me, only to open a bigger one. But only after I had learned something essential. A clear example came from a work experience years ago. I had lost an important project, one in which I had invested months of effort and dedication. At that moment, I felt that everything was lost. However, that very loss pushed me to seek new opportunities, to explore paths I never would have considered before. And it was on one of those paths where I found the opportunity that would define my career. What would have happened if I had given up at the moment of the crisis? Throughout this journey, I discovered that crises are teachers in disguise. They challenge us, confront us with our own limitations, and force us to grow in ways we would never imagine. But to find the miracle in the midst of the challenge, we must first ask ourselves the right questions. What is this teaching me? How can I use this experience to strengthen myself? What part of me needs to change to overcome this moment? One of the most important lessons I learned was the importance of accepting pain instead of resisting it. We often spend so much time fighting against circumstances that we forget that there is also learning in that struggle. I realized that the more I tried to escape from the pain, the more it persisted. But when I decided to face it with courage, it began to transform into wisdom. I don't want to romanticize crises or make them seem easier than they are. There are moments when you feel completely defeated, and that's okay. It's part of the process. But what truly matters is what you decide to do with those moments. Will you allow yourself to be destroyed by them, or will you use them as catalysts for a profound transformation? On one occasion, a mentor told me a story that changed the way I see challenges. He told me about a farmer who, after a great storm, saw how his crop field had been devastated. For weeks, he was desolate, until one day he noticed that the soil, now stirred by the storm, was more fertile than ever. Instead of lamenting, he decided to plant new seeds, and that season, he harvested more than in any other. Sometimes the storm you think is coming to destroy you is the very one that prepares the ground for your biggest harvest, he told me. That metaphor reminded me that crises, although painful, are also an opportunity to reevaluate your goals, to redefine your purpose, and to discover what you are truly capable of. What would you do if you started seeing the challenges in your life as preludes to miracles? How would your perspective change if you knew that on the other side of the pain, something valuable is always waiting for you? The more I delved into this idea, the clearer it became. Crises are inevitable, but so are the miracles that accompany them. However, these miracles do not always appear in the way we expect. Sometimes they come in the form of a new opportunity. Other times, in the form of a lesson that prepares us for something bigger. The real question is, are you willing to look for the miracle in the midst of your crisis? Are you willing to learn the wisdom that the challenge wants to teach you? Because if you are, I assure you that you will find it. And when you do, it will be a turning point in your life. The dormant talent, how to multiply what you have, clearly. Remember a moment in my life when I felt like I wasn't moving forward? I worked hard, followed the steps that others had recommended, but something was missing. It was as if I was going in circles without direction. One afternoon, while walking in a nearby park, I saw a child playing with a ball. He kicked it again, and again against a wall, trying to make it bounce at the perfect angle to return to his feet. He failed over and over, but he didn't stop. I watched for several minutes until he finally succeeded. The ball bounced with precision and came directly back to him. It was at that instant that something clicked inside me. How many times do we give up before we find the perfect angle? That child was perfecting a skill, a hidden talent, without even realizing he was doing it. I asked myself, what dormant talents do I have that I haven't discovered yet? What parts of myself have I not put into action? Throughout my life, I have met people with extraordinary talent who, for some reason, never took advantage of it. They would always say things like, "It's not the right time," or "I don't know if I'm good enough." But what was really missing was not the right time or the skill. It was the confidence to begin. I remember when I myself faced this reality. There was a skill I had always underestimated, my ability to connect with people. I thought it was something natural, something everyone could do, until a friend told me, "Do you realize that not everyone can do what you do? That connection you achieve is a talent you can use to change lives." His comment left me thinking for days. How many times had I ignored that skill because I assumed it wasn't special? It was then that I decided to explore that idea further. I set out to use that ability to connect, to teach, to inspire, to create something meaningful. But it wasn't easy. I faced doubts, fears, the internal voice that told me, "What if you fail? What if it's not enough?" However, I forced myself to remember, a talent that is not used is like a seed that is never planted. It has potential, but it will never bear fruit if you don't put it into action. An experience that marked this learning occurred at a workshop, where I was invited to be a facilitator. It was my first time in that role, and although I was nervous, I decided to focus on using my talent to connect with the people present. At the end of the day, someone approached me and said, "Today I understood something I had never seen clearly before, thanks to the way you explained it." That phrase stayed with me, not because I was seeking validation, but because it confirmed to me that when you use your talents in the service of others, you multiply their impact. But here's the key. Multiplying what you have doesn't mean just using it for yourself. It means sharing it, teaching it, allowing others to benefit from what you know how to do. Because when you share your talent, you not only help others but also discover new ways to expand it. Once someone asked me, "How do you discover your hidden talents?" My answer was simple but profound. By exploring, trying new things, and being willing to fail many times. Talents are often not revealed in moments of comfort, but in situations of challenge. It is in those moments when you are forced to search within yourself and discover resources you didn't even know you had. So I ask you, what skills do you have that you have been ignoring? What things do you do with ease that others find difficult? What can you do today to start exploring those talents? The answers to these questions can change the course of your life. I realize that dormant talents are not just practical skills. They are also attitudes, perspectives, unique ways of seeing the world. They are often hidden right in front of us, waiting to be recognized. But to recognize them, we must be willing to get out of our routine, to question what we take for granted, to try something new. I began to apply this mindset in all areas of my life. I set out to learn something new every week, to try something. That intimidated me, even if it seemed insignificant, and in each of those attempts, I found something I could improve, something I could multiply. I discovered that the more I explored, the more talents emerged. Have you ever wondered what you could achieve if you awakened that talent within you? How would your life change if you decided to use what you already have, if it seems small? Create something bigger? Because in the end, it's not about how much you have, but about how you use it to make a difference. I continued to reflect on this, convinced that within each of us, there is a potential waiting to be released, a dormant talent ready to multiply. Are you ready to awaken yours? The humility of learning. The key to wisdom. A few years ago, I found myself in a room full of leaders I deeply admired. It was an exclusive event, a space where every conversation had the potential to transform lives. As I listened intently to one of the speakers, a man who had built an empire from scratch, I realized something curious. Despite all his success, his tone was humble, almost as if he were still learning. At one point in his speech, he paused, smiled, and said, "Every day I realize how little I know. That's what drives me to keep growing." That phrase left me thinking for days. How could someone so successful say that they still didn't know enough? In my mind, knowledge had always been something to be achieved, like a tangible goal.
Ow.
But that afternoon I realized that true knowledge has no end. It is a continuous journey. And humility is the passport that allows you to move forward. I remember a time in my life when I thought I knew everything. I had read the right books, attended the most exclusive conferences, and even given my own workshops. But at some point, I realized that I had stopped listening. I was so sure of my own answers that I had lost the ability to ask questions, and it was precisely at that moment that I stopped growing. A particular experience shook me deeply. During a meeting with a client, I faced a problem that I didn't know how to solve. Instead of admitting it, I tried to hide my lack of knowledge, which only complicated the situation. While with the now with the planet odd evident. A colleague approached me and said something I won't forget. "Why didn't you ask for help?" Sometimes true wisdom is in recognizing what you don't know. That comment, although uncomfortable at the time, became an invaluable lesson. I realized that the arrogance of knowing can be a bigger obstacle than ignorance itself. Because when you think you already know everything, close the door to new possibilities, new ideas, new ways of growing. It was then that I decided to change my approach. I began to ask questions, not only to experts, but also to people with different experiences than mine. I discovered that everyone has something to teach if you are willing to listen. Once, in a conversation with a taxi driver, I learned a lesson about perseverance that no book had ever taught me. He told me, "Every day is different in this job. Sometimes you earn a lot, sometimes almost nothing. But there's always something new to learn from the people who get in this car." That conversation reminded me that wisdom doesn't always come from the places you expect. It's often hidden in the simplest interactions, in the stories of ordinary people. In the moments when you let your guard down and allow others to teach you. But to learn, you first have to be humble. How many learning opportunities have I lost by not being willing to admit that I don't know something? I asked myself one night while writing in my journal, and that question led me to another, even more important one. What am I willing to do to become a better learner? Over time, I discovered that the humility of learning doesn't mean putting yourself down or belittling yourself. On the contrary, it is about recognizing your value, but also accepting that there is always more to discover. It is having the confidence to say, "I don't know, but I am willing to learn." An experience that highlighted this idea occurred during a workshop I was facilitating. An attendee asked me a question that I didn't know how to answer. My first instinct was to try to avoid the question. But then I decided to be honest. I told him I don't have the answer right now, but I'm going to research it and I'll get back to you with a response. At the end of the workshop, that person approached me and said, "I appreciate your honesty. You taught me more with that answer than with anything else." That interaction reminded me that humility not only allows you to learn, but also inspires. Trust in others, because when you show that you are willing to learn, you give others permission to do the same. As I reflected on these moments, I realized something even deeper. Learning is not just a skill. It is a lifestyle. It is a daily decision to keep an open mind, to seek growth in every experience, and to be willing to question even what you think you already know. Now I ask myself, what areas of your life could be transformed if you allowed yourself to learn with humility? What opportunities have you let pass by, not admitting that you don't know everything? These questions don't have easy answers, but they are fundamental if you want to grow, and perhaps that is the key, to accept that wisdom is not achieved. It is built day after day, moment by moment, through every conversation, every mistake, and every small lesson that life gives us. Are you ready to become an eternal learner? Personal transformation. Beyond failures, I clearly remember a moment when I felt that everything was lost. I had invested months, even years, in a project that was destined to be my greatest achievement. But in a matter of days, it all came crashing down. The loss was not only financial. I felt that my identity was at stake. How could I consider myself successful if I was facing such an obvious failure? That night, sitting in front of my empty desk, the question wouldn't leave me alone. What do I do now? It was a simple question, but its weight was overwhelming. I realized that at that moment, I had two options: give up or transform the experience into something meaningful. Unbeknownst to me at the time, that decision would be a turning point in my life. The first thing I learned was that failure doesn't define who you are, but it does have the power to reveal things about you that you never would have discovered otherwise. At first, I found it hard to accept this. I felt trapped in a cycle of self-criticism, asking myself over and over what I had done wrong. But then someone close to me said something that changed my perspective. Failure is a teacher that shows you what you need to learn to move forward, but only if you are willing to listen to it. That phrase led me to ask myself a new question. What can I learn from this moment? At first, I couldn't find clear answers, but over time, I began to identify small lessons hidden in the details. I realized that I had ignored warning signs, that I had taken on more than I could handle, and that I hadn't sought help when I needed it. Each of those discoveries, although painful, became a key piece for my transformation. One day, while walking in a park to clear my mind, I saw a group of children playing with a kite. One of them was pulling the string hard, trying to keep the kite in the air even though the wind seemed too strong. Every time the kite fell, the child would pick it up again, adjusting the angle, changing his approach, trying something different. Finally, he managed to get the kite to fly high, stable, and beautiful. I stopped to watch and thought, that's exactly what I need to do. Adjust, try, and learn. That simple moment reminded me that failure is not the end. It is a pause, an opportunity to recalibrate and try again with more wisdom. But to get to that point, I first had to change my relationship with failure. Instead of seeing it as something to avoid, I began to see it as an inevitable part of the growth process. As I faced this new perspective, I began to notice something interesting. Failures not only taught me lessons, but also made me more resilient. Every time I overcame an obstacle, I felt a little stronger, a little more confident that I could handle whatever came next. But that strength didn't come only from the successes that followed the failure. It came from the simple act of not giving up. In a conversation with a mentor, I shared these reflections, and he responded with something I still carry with me. Failure is like a chisel. If you use it well, it can sculpt you into something stronger, more defined, more authentic. That metaphor led me to ask myself, am I letting my failures sculpt me, or are they destroying me? The answer depended entirely on me. It was my choice to decide whether each stumble would be a step forward or an excuse to stop. One of the most revealing moments of this process occurred when I began to share my failures with others. At first, I was afraid of looking weak, of exposing myself too much. But what I discovered was the opposite. Every time I talked about my downfalls, I connected more deeply with people. I realized that everyone, on some level, faces their own failures, and that sharing our stories reminds us that we are not alone. In one of those conversations, someone told me, I thought I was the only one who felt that way. Knowing that you have also gone through this gives me hope. That simple statement reaffirmed something I was already beginning to understand. Failures, when shared honestly, can be a source of strength, not only for you, but also for those around you. What would we do if we stopped fearing failure and embraced it as a fundamental part of our personal transformation? Because personal transformation does not happen in spite of failures, but thanks to them. I'm still on that journey, learning, adjusting, growing, but one thing I know for sure, failures are not the enemy. They are allies in disguise, guides that show us the way to what we are truly capable of achieving. Are you willing to listen to what they have to teach you? the divine will. Trusting the invisible plan. There was a moment in my life when I found myself completely lost. I had followed every step I believed was correct. I had worked tirelessly, made strategic decisions, and calculated every risk. However, the results were not coming. I felt as if I were trapped in a dense fog, unable to see the path ahead of me. It was then that I asked myself, what happens when you do everything in your power and it still doesn't work? That question led me to an afternoon I will never forget. I was sitting on a park bench, watching the sun disappear behind the clouds. There was something about that scene that felt eerily similar to what I was experiencing, a moment of temporary, but inevitably followed by light. It was at that instant that I remembered something a friend had told me many years ago. Life doesn't always follow the plan we draw up, but it always follows the plan that needs to be. Those words gave me a strange comfort. What if I wasn't? Lost, but exactly where I needed to be. What if instead of fighting against what I couldn't control, I began to trust that there was a greater purpose guiding every step, even the ones I didn't understand? The idea of an invisible plan is not easy to accept, especially when you are used to being in control. But the more I reflected, the more I realized that the times in my life when I had experienced the greatest growth had been precisely those. When I had let go of that control and trusted in something bigger than myself. I remember an important project that I had planned for months. Everything was aligned, or so I thought. But as the date approached, problems began to arise. Key people withdrew, resources did not arrive on time, and what had started as a promising dream became a crushing burden. At that moment, I was forced to stop. I sat down with my team and told them, "We have done everything in our power. Now it's time to let things flow as they should." It was a difficult decision, but something magical happened. Little by little, the pieces began to fit together in ways I never could have anticipated. New opportunities arose, unexpected people offered their support, and the project took a completely different course. Of course. Here's the final part of the translation for the audio transcript you provided. The divine will, trusting the invisible plan, opening parenthesis, continued closing parenthesis, ... infinitely better. That experience taught me that there is a force working in our lives, even when we can't see it. What would have happened if I hadn't let go of control? I often ask myself. Over the years, I've heard many similar stories. People who, facing moments of uncertainty, decided to trust the process and found results that exceeded their expectations. One of those stories came from a woman I met at an event. She told me how she had lost her job under devastating circumstances. But that loss led her to discover her true passion and build a business that not only gave her financial success, but also a deep personal satisfaction. She told me something that was etched in my mind. Sometimes what seems like an obstacle is simply the path leading you to where you truly need to be. That conversation led me to reflect. How many times do we resist what we don't understand, only to realize later that it was exactly what we needed? Life doesn't always show us the complete picture. It gives us small pieces, signs, moments that seem disconnected. But when you look back and see how everything was orchestrated in a way that you couldn't have planned better. Trusting in an invisible plan does not mean passivity. It doesn't mean sitting and waiting for everything to solve itself. It simply means doing your part diligently, but also accepting that there are things you can't control. It means recognizing that your efforts are important, but they are not the only thing that determines the outcome. One of the most important lessons I learned was that trusting is not giving up. It is collaborating. It is walking forward with the certainty that even if you can't see the end of the road, there is a reason you are on it. That trust gives you peace in the midst of uncertainty and allows you to face challenges with a different perspective. Now, I invite you to ask yourself a question that has guided me through the most difficult moments. What would happen if you trusted that even when things don't go as you expected, they are going as they should? Perhaps that question will lead you to let go of some of the burden you're carrying, to make space for life to act in ways you never would have imagined. As I write this, I keep remembering all the times when I thought I was in the wrong place, only to realize later that it was exactly where I needed to be. Could it be that right now, Even in your moments of doubt, you are being guided towards something greater? Are you willing to trust in that invisible plan? True success. Redefining the spiritual legacy, there was a time in my life when I confused success with accumulation. I believed that more achievements, more money, and more recognition would bring me closer to that idea of fulfillment I so longed for. And for years, I lived in that illusion, reaching goals, but feeling emptier and emptier. It was an unexpected conversation that began to change my perspective. I was visiting a close friend, someone I had always admired for his calmness and wisdom. As we talked, I asked him what he considered to be his greatest achievement in life. He looked at me with a calm smile and replied, "My greatest achievement isn't something you can measure or count. It's the impact I've had on the people I love and the peace I feel in my heart." That answer left me speechless. It was so simple, but contained a profound truth. In that instant, I began to ask myself, what kind of legacy am I building? Leaving behind something that transcends the material? Until that moment, I hadn't realized that I was chasing an incomplete idea of success, one that ignored what truly matters. That conversation was a catalyst. It led me to reflect on my life and the decisions I had made. I realized that I had been investing time and energy in things that had limited value, while neglecting what truly gave meaning to my existence. Relationships, purpose, spiritual connection. A specific experience showed me this truth even more clearly. During an event, I had the opportunity to speak with an older woman who had dedicated her life to helping others. When I asked her what made her feel fulfilled, she replied, "Knowing that what I did made a difference. Even if it was a small one in the lives of others, that's what I take with me." Her words resonated deeply within me. Realize that true success is not about what we accumulate, but about what we share. It's not about how many trophies we put on our shelves, but about how many lives we touch with our actions. From then on, I began to redefine my vision of success. I stopped measuring it solely by visible results and started focusing on the impact I could have in the present. This didn't mean giving up on financial or professional goals, but integrating them into a broader purpose, one that included personal growth and spiritual connection. I began to ask myself every day, am I building something worth remembering? Am I investing in the things that truly matter? These questions led me to make more conscious decisions, to prioritize time with my family, to work on projects that reflected my values, and to cultivate a meaningful life. One of the greatest lessons I learned in this process was that a spiritual legacy is not something we leave at the end of our life, but something we build day by day. It is in the conversations we have, in the decisions we make, and in the way we face challenges. It is something we leave in the hearts of those around us, not in the pages of a resume. I remember a particularly revealing moment when I stopped to observe a colleague who always seemed calm, even in the most tense situations. One day I asked him how he managed it. He told me, "I focus on what I can control, and I trust that the rest will fall into place. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is whether I lived in accordance with my values." That answer led me to rethink many things. Was I truly living in accordance with my values, or was I being dragged along by the pressure of external expectations? It was an uncomfortable but necessary moment. Now, I understand that true success is not about reaching a final destination, but about how we walk the path. It's about the authenticity with which we live, the humility with which we learn, and the gratitude with which we face each day. It's about building a legacy that is not measured in numbers, but in emotions, memories, and connections. What does success mean to you? What are you building today that reflects your deepest values? Perhaps the answer is not immediate, but I assure you it's worth seeking. Because when we redefine success, we discover that it is no longer just about what we achieve, but about who we become in the process. What legacy are you leaving in this moment? What mark are you creating in the world that truly matters? Faith and finances. The delicate balance. There was a time in my life when I felt that every financial decision I made was a gamble against my own values. I worked hard, planned carefully, and followed every practical piece of advice I could find. But something didn't fit. No matter how many economic goals I reached, there was an unease within me, a feeling that I was leaving something essential aside. It was then that I began to ask myself, how can I balance my financial goals with my faith? I remember one particular morning, I was reviewing my accounts, adjusting budgets, and planning the next quarter. Everything seemed in order, but my mind remained restless. I felt trapped between the desire to secure my financial future and the need to trust in something bigger than myself. Was it possible to do both? Could I build stability without losing sight of the purpose that truly gave meaning to my life? The answer began to take shape during a conversation with a mentor, someone whose wisdom I had always admired. He told me something I will never forget. Money is an excellent servant, but a terrible master. When you learn to manage it from faith and not from fear, you find balance. Those words stayed with me. I realized that for a long time I had made financial decisions based on fear of not having enough, fear of losing what I had accumulated, fear of not meeting expectations. But what if fear wasn't the right motivator? What would happen if, instead, I let my faith guide those decisions? That idea led me to reframe my relationship with money. I started asking myself, am I using my resources in a way that reflects my values? Am I investing in things that truly matter? Not just in the short term, but in the long term, in the legacy I want to leave. In this process, I learned something fundamental. Faith and finances are not in conflict, but they require a delicate balance. On one hand, you need responsibility, planning, and action. On the other, you need to trust that there is a greater purpose at play. Even when things don't go as planned, an experience that solidified this lesson occurred when I faced an unexpected financial crisis. I'd done everything possible to prepare, but still circumstances seemed to be out of my control. I remember feeling a mix of frustration and uncertainty until a friend reminded me. Faith doesn't eliminate hard work, but it gives you the peace to keep going even when you can't see the full path. That phrase was like a lighthouse in the middle of the storm. I realized that I wasn't alone on this journey. There was something bigger guiding my steps, even in the midst of uncertainty. That renewed confidence allowed me to make clearer decisions and eventually find solutions I hadn't considered before. The balance between faith and finances is not a destination. It is a path you walk every day. It's the way you decide how to spend your time, your resources, and your energy. It's constantly asking yourself, am I managing my finances with a higher purpose in mind? Am I allowing my decisions to reflect my faith, or am I letting fear take control? I discovered that when you combine faith with action, the result is a life more aligned with your values. I began to allocate part of my income to causes that truly mattered to me, to invest in relationships and experiences that enriched my soul, and to plan with intention, knowing that faith does not replace responsibility, but complements it. As I advanced on this path, I met many people facing the same questions. Once in a meeting, someone shared a concern that resonated deeply with me. How do I trust that everything will be okay when the numbers don't add up? My response was simple but sincere. You trust because you know you have done your part, and because you know that there are greater forces working with you. You trust because faith is not just hoping for the best. It is acting with purpose, even in uncertainty. That conversation reminded me that the balance between faith and finances is not about perfection, but about intention. It's about being aware that every decision you make has an impact, not only on your life, but on the lives of those around you. At the same time, recognizing that you can't control everything, and that's okay now. Reflecting on this journey, I want to leave you with a question. What are you doing today to align your finances with your values? How can you allow your faith to guide your decisions while still being responsible and proactive? Perhaps there is no single answer, but what I do know is that when you find that balance, you discover a peace that transcends the material. This path is not easy, but it is deeply transformative, because when you learn to trust the process, to work from faith and not from fear, you discover that true success is not in quantity, but in the quality of the life you are building.
What steps?
Will you take today to walk in that balance? Letting go to move forward? Lessons from the rich young man? There was a time in my life when I believed that accumulating more was the key to moving forward. I thought that success was measured in numbers, in possessions, and achievements that others could admire. However, the more I obtained, the heavier the path became. It was as if the things I had accumulated, which in theory should have freed me, became invisible chains that prevented me from moving with freedom. I remember a specific moment that made me rethink everything. I was reviewing an important project, one that had consumed months of work, and although I had reached the goals I had set for myself, I didn't feel satisfied. It was then that a friend with whom I shared my concerns asked me a question I didn't expect. What are you carrying that you no longer need? What could you let go of to move forward lighter? I didn't know how to answer him at that moment, but his question stayed with me. It led me to reflect on all the tangible and intangible things I was accumulating. How many of those things really mattered? How many were there just because I was afraid to let them go? A few days later, while organizing some things in my office, I found an old list of goals I had written years ago. The list was full of material goals, a specific car, a bigger house, a certain amount of money in the bank. I had accomplished most of those goals, but when I reread the list, I didn't feel the satisfaction I had expected. Instead, I realized that many of those goals had nothing to do with who I was at that moment or with what I truly valued. It was a revealing moment. I understood that part of my dissatisfaction came from chasing things that no longer resonated with me. What would happen if I let go of what is no longer essential? How would my life change if I decided to move forward with only what truly matters? The idea of letting go was not easy to accept at first. I had worked so hard to achieve certain things that letting them go felt like a failure. But the more I reflected, the more I realized that holding on to what no longer served me wasn't success. It was fear. It was fear of losing what I had accumulated. Fear of facing the possibility of not knowing who I was without those things. It was then that I remembered the story of the rich young man, the one I had heard many times, but had never fully understood. The young man, full of possessions and achievements, meets a wise person who tells him that to achieve something greater, he must leave everything behind. The first time I heard that story, I thought it was too great a sacrifice, but now I saw something different. It wasn't about giving up everything completely, but about detaching from the attachment, from the chains that bind us to what we think we are. A concrete experience helped me put this into practice. I was about to embark on a new project, but something was holding me back. There was an old idea, an old plan that I found it hard to let go of because I felt that abandoning it would mean failing. However, after weeks of indecision, I decided to let it go. What I discovered was liberating. By letting go of what no longer made sense, I opened space for something much more aligned with my purpose. That moment taught me a fundamental truth. Moving forward doesn't always mean adding. Sometimes it means letting go. It means freeing up space in your life so that the new can enter. What are you holding on to that you no longer need? What could you let go of today to take a step forward? Throughout this process, I also understood that letting go is not always about the material. Sometimes it's about letting go of beliefs that limit us, relationships that no longer nourish us, or expectations that were never truly ours. Every time I decided to leave something behind, I felt as if a part of me was being freed, as if the weight I was carrying was getting lighter. Once, someone asked me, "How do you know what to let go of and what to keep?" My answer was simple but sincere. You know when you ask yourself if it is adding to the person you want to be, or if it is just taking up space. Now, as I reflect on this journey, I realize that the act of letting go is not a loss. It is a gain. It is gaining clarity, freedom, and focus. It is recognizing that what you have does not define you, and that letting go is not an act of weakness but of strength. I want to invite you to do this reflection with me. What burdens are you carrying that you no longer need? What could you let go of today to move toward the life you truly desire? It may not be easy at first, but I assure you that by doing so, you will feel a lightness that will allow you to see the path more clearly. The process of letting go is not something that happens once. It is a habit, a constant practice. Every day we face decisions about what to keep and what to let go of, And in those decisions, we build not only our present, but also our future. What will you choose today? What will you let go of to move toward the life you really want to build? The power of gratitude, cultivating inner abundance, it was at a time in my life when everything seemed to be moving too fast that I understood the true power of gratitude. The days passed in a whirlwind of goals, deadlines, and expectations, and although I managed to achieve what I set out to do, I felt an emptiness I couldn't explain. It was as if everything I had was never enough. One morning, while reviewing my plans for the month, I stopped. I looked around me at the achievements, the comforts, the opportunities, and yet I felt that something was missing. When was the last time I stopped to be grateful for what I already have? I asked myself. That question marked the beginning of a profound change in my life. I realized that I had been so focused on what I wanted to achieve that I had forgotten to value what I already had. That same afternoon, I decided to do something different. I took a notebook and began to write down 3 things I was grateful for that day. At first, it felt forced, almost superficial. But over time, that daily practice became a ritual that transformed the way I saw the world. I remember one day in particular while traveling on a train to an important meeting. I looked out the window and saw a landscape that I had overlooked many times. The fields, the mountains in the distance, the sunlight reflecting on the water. Something so simple, but so full of beauty. I felt a wave of gratitude that almost made me cry. It was as if in that instant time stopped, and I could see everything that truly mattered. How many wonderful things do we ignore every day because we're too busy to stop and notice them? I thought. That moment taught me that gratitude doesn't depend on circumstances. It's not about having more, about achieving something, or about waiting for everything to be perfect. It is a choice, a perspective, a way of being present and recognizing the abundance that already exists in our lives. Even in the simplest moments, throughout my life beauty infinitely better. That experience taught me that there's a force at work in our lives, even when we can't see it. What would have happened if I hadn't let go of control? I often ask myself. Over the years, I've heard many similar stories of people who, when facing uncertainty, decided to trust the process and found results that surpassed their expectations. One such story came from a woman I met at an event. She told me how, after losing almost everything during a crisis, she decided to focus on the only things she had left: her family, her health, and the small moments of happiness. She told me, "I learned that gratitude is what makes you feel rich, even when you have nothing." That conversation was etched into my heart. It made me reflect on how many times I had overlooked the most important things, the ones that can't be bought or measured. What valuable things am I ignoring right now? I began to ask myself every day, and with each answer, I felt a sense of abundance growing within me that didn't depend on external factors but on internal ones. The most surprising thing about practicing gratitude is how it affects not only your perspective but also your actions. When you begin to appreciate what you have, you start to take better care of it. Your relationships are strengthened because you value the people by your side. Your resources multiply because you stop focusing on scarcity and begin to see opportunities everywhere. Even your challenges are transformed because you understand that each one brings a lesson that can enrich your life. I remember a project that seemed to be full of obstacles from the beginning. Every problem made me feel more frustrated until I decided to change my approach. I began to give thanks for every small bit of progress, for every lesson, even for the difficulties that forced me to grow. That change not only gave me the energy to keep going, but also helped me find solutions I hadn't seen before. It was then that I understood that gratitude is not just a feeling, but a powerful force that can transform your reality. I often hear people say that practicing gratitude is easy when things are going well, but difficult when we face challenges. My answer is always the same. It's in the difficult moments that gratitude has the most power, because when you are thankful, even in the midst of a storm, you discover an inner strength that allows you to overcome any adversity. What could you be grateful for today, even in the midst of your worries? What opportunities would open up if you shifted your focus toward gratitude? Perhaps the answer is not immediate, but I assure you it's there, waiting to be discovered. This journey isn't linear or perfect. What I know for sure is that every day you choose to be thankful, you're cultivating something deeper than success. You're building a life with purpose, with meaning, with true abundance. Because in the end, wealth isn't in what you own, but in what you value. What are you valuing today?
S.
What are you thankful for that will make this day unforgettable? Skills and purpose. Discovering your calling. I remember a stage in my life when I felt stuck. I was doing what I was supposed to, what was expected of me, but inside, there was a constant feeling that something was missing. It was as if I was walking on a well-trodden path but couldn't ignore the inner voice telling me, is this really your path? Are you using your skills for something that fills you with purpose? That questioning began a search that wasn't easy, but that transformed my life. One afternoon, while reflecting at my desk, I found myself writing a list of the things I was good at. At first, the words came with difficulty. I had always assumed that my skills were common, that anyone could do what I did. But as I wrote, something changed. I began to see patterns at all I had been ignoring, abilities that could be tools to build something bigger. I stopped and asked myself, what if these skills are part of something deeper? What if they could be the key to discovering my purpose? We often underestimate our own abilities because we're so used to them. It's easy to take for granted what we do well. But those skills are like puzzle pieces waiting to be joined to reveal a bigger picture. I remember meeting someone who worked at a job he wasn't passionate about, but had an extraordinary. One day I asked him, what's stopping you from using that ability for something that inspires you? At me, confused, and replied, I never thought that was a talent. It's just something I do. That answer resonated deeply with me, because for a long time I too had ignored the skills that seemed normal to me. It was then that I understood that our skills, no matter how small or common they seem, are unique in the way we use them, and more importantly, they can become the bridge to our purpose if we are willing to explore them. My own transformation began when I decided to combine what I knew how to do with what I loved. I asked myself, how can I use my skills to serve a greater purpose? That question led me to take risks, step out of my comfort zone, and try new things. Were there failures? But there were also discoveries I never would have imagined. One of the things I learned was that purpose isn't always something grand or immediate. It often starts as a small spark, an interest, a curiosity that grows over time, but to find it, you first have to act. You have to start using your skills, even if you don't have all the answers, because purpose isn't revealed in a single moment. It is built through every step you take. An experience that changed my perspective was working on a community project. I had been invited to give a talk on personal development, something I had done many times, but this time was different. People in the room weren't just looking for practical advice. They were looking for hope, inspiration, something that would remind them they could change their lives. As I spoke, I realized that my words came not only from my knowledge, but from my own experiences and the skills I had developed by facing my own challenges. At the end of the talk, someone approached me and said, "Today I understood that I can do something with what I know." I hadn't thought of my skills as valuable. That moment confirmed for me that when you use your skills to serve others, you not only find purpose, but also help others discover theirs. Asterisk now, what skills do you have that you might be underestimating? What could you do with them if you combine them with your passions? Perhaps you don't have all the answers right now, and that's okay. Purpose isn't a final goal. It's a path that reveals itself as you move forward. Throughout this journey, I've learned that our skills aren't just tools, they're gifts. But these gifts only come to life when we share them, when we use them to create something that transcends our own needs. How are you using your skills today to get closer to your purpose? I ask myself every day, and I invite you to ask yourself the same question. Purpose isn't something you find overnight, it's something you build with intention, with effort, and above all, with faith that your skills have a place in the world. Are you ready to take the first step toward your calling? What will you do today to start discovering it? Refined gold. Faith in the fire of adversity. There was a time in my life when I felt that the weight of difficulties was too much to bear. Each day seemed like an endless battle, and no matter how hard I tried, solutions didn't come. It was a stage full of uncertainty, where questions seemed to outweigh answers. Why me? And why now? Constantly repeated to myself. But in that chaos, I discovered a truth that transformed my perspective. Adversities don't come to destroy us, but to refine us, to bring out the best in us, like gold that is purified in fire. That realization wasn't immediate. It came through small moments, from experiences that seemed insignificant at the time, but when connected, revealed a greater purpose. One of those experiences occurred during a conversation with someone who had faced much greater losses than mine. He told me something that resonated deeply. Gold doesn't fear the fire because it knows. It's in the fire that it becomes purer. In the days that followed, I reflected on those words. I thought about how in the midst of the most difficult trials, I had found a strength I didn't know I had. I remembered moments when I felt I couldn't go on, but somehow I did. Where did that strength come from that pushed me to get up again and again, even when everything seemed lost? The answer, although simple, was powerful. Faith. Not a blind or passive faith, but an active faith, a trust that every challenge brought with it a lesson, an opportunity to grow. But that faith wasn't something built overnight. It was like a muscle that grew stronger with each trial. With each experience that challenged me to trust that the process had a purpose. Even when I couldn't see it clearly, I remember one particular moment that solidified this lesson. I had been working on a project that meant a lot to me, but seemed destined to fail. Every step I took seemed to lead me to a dead end. One day, while walking in a park to clear my mind, I saw a man working. With a small metal furnace, I stopped to watch how he placed pieces of metal into the fire, patiently waiting for the heat to do its work. I asked him what he was doing, and he replied, "I'm refining." The fire removes the impurities and reveals what truly matters. That answer left me thinking, what impurities is this fire removing in my life? What is it revealing that I couldn't see before? That reflection gave me an unexpected clarity. I realized that trials were not a punishment, but an opportunity to let go of what no longer served me, to strengthen what truly mattered. Adversity, although painful, also has the power to reveal our essence. It forces us to confront our weaknesses, to question our beliefs, and to redefine our priorities. But more importantly, it teaches us to trust, to let go of control, and to allow the process to do its work. A mentor once told me, "Don't focus on what you're losing in the fire, but on what you're gaining through it." That phrase changed my perspective. I began to see every challenge as an opportunity to grow, to learn, to strengthen my faith. I started to ask myself, what lessons is this moment teaching me? What part of me is being refined? Throughout this journey, I also understood that the fire of adversity is not something we have to face alone. Finding support in others, sharing our struggles, and accepting help are acts of courage, not weakness. I learned that strength isn't in pretending to have all the answers, but in admitting that we are a work in progress, in recognizing that the fire not only purifies, but also connects us to those who are willing to walk with us. Now, as I reflect on these experiences, I realize that every challenge has been an essential part of my journey. Without them, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Without them, I wouldn't have discovered the depth of my faith, the capacity of my resilience, and the purpose that drives me to keep going. What adversity are you facing now that could be refining you? What part of you is being strengthened? In this process, perhaps you can't see the purpose at this moment, and that's okay. But trust that just like gold, you are being purified, transformed into something stronger, purer, more valuable. The fire is not the end. It is the beginning of something new. It is the process that prepares us for what is to come, that reveals what we are truly capable of being. Are you willing to trust in that process? What are you willing to learn from? The fire you are facing today? Divine connections. How God speaks through others' eye. Remember a day that started like any other, but ended up completely changing my perspective on how the deepest things in life work. I was at a crossroads searching for answers that I couldn't seem to find. I had spent weeks reflecting, writing, praying, but the clarity I needed just wasn't coming. It was then that a seemingly casual conversation with a stranger showed me something I had never considered. The answers you seek sometimes come through the people you least expect. I was sitting in a coffee shop trying to organize my thoughts, when an older woman, who seemed to have all the calm in the world, asked for permission to share my table. We talked about simple things at first, the weather, the coffee, the books she liked to read, but at some point, the conversation took an unexpected turn. With a disarming serenity, she told me, sometimes the answers you're looking for aren't in the noise of your mind, but in the words of those God puts in your path. That phrase resonated deeply. It made me remember all the times in my life when someone, without realizing it, had said exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. Words that, however simple, seemed loaded with a greater meaning. But how many times had I ignored those signals? How many times had I been so focused on finding answers in my own way that I hadn't paid attention to the messages coming through others? That afternoon, as I walked home, I asked myself a question I had never asked before. What if the people we meet aren't there by chance? What if every conversation has the potential to be a divine connection? Over time, I began to pay more attention to the interactions I had every day. I realized that even in the most ordinary moments, there was a kind of subtle dance and exchange of words, glances, and gestures that contained small flashes of truth. Once, a colleague, unknowingly, gave me the advice I needed to solve a problem I had been facing for weeks. Another time, a friend shared a story that made me see my own challenges from a completely new perspective. But the most impactful moment occurred during a trip. I met a taxi driver who, in the middle of a conversation about the difficulties of life, told me something I will never forget. Sometimes God doesn't speak to us directly because He knows. We need to hear a voice we can understand, a voice that is close. That statement made me reflect deeply. How many times has God spoken through others, and I haven't been listening? As I reflected on these experiences, I realized something important. To hear these messages, you first have to be willing to listen. You have to be present, attentive, open to the idea that every person you meet may have something to teach you. But you also have to learn to discern, because not all the words you hear are divine messages. That's where faith and intuition come in, that feeling in your heart that tells you when something is more than just a coincidence. One day, during a walk, I found myself thinking about all the people who had impacted my life in ways they could never imagine. Some were close friends. Others were strangers who were only there for a moment. But each of them had left something, a word, an idea, a spark of inspiration that had influenced the path I took. It was then that I understood that divine connections are not always grand or spectacular. They are often subtle, almost imperceptible. They are in the smile of someone who encourages you on a difficult day, in a piece of advice you hear by chance, in a conversation that seems insignificant but leaves a mark on your soul. What messages might you be receiving through the people around you? What words, gestures, or actions could be answers to the questions you've been asking? Perhaps you won't have the immediate answer, but I assure you that if you pay attention, you will start to see patterns, signals, moments that are not coincidences. Divine connections are all around us, waiting to be discovered. But first, we must open our eyes, our hearts, and our minds. Maybe the next conversation you have will be more than a simple exchange of words. Maybe it will be a message meant to guide you, to remind you that you are never alone on this journey. Are you ready to listen? Preparing the path? Tools for the future. A few years ago, I found myself in a moment of uncertainty that seemed to have no end. I had made decisions I thought were correct, but things weren't moving forward as I had expected. It was as if I were standing in front of a foggy path, not knowing what the next step was. One night, while reviewing my notes and plans, I asked myself a question that changed everything. Am I really prepared for what I am asking for? That question led me to reflect on something I had overlooked for a long time. I had been so focused on the destination that I forgot to prepare the necessary tools to travel the path. It was then that I understood that success doesn't come just from wanting it or planning it, but from being prepared to face it. And that preparation isn't always visible or glamorous. I remember a particular day that solidified this lesson. I was working on a project that demanded more than I thought I had. I felt that every step forward required a monumental effort, as if I were building a house without the right tools. Frustrated, I spoke with a mentor for advice. His response was direct but deeply revealing. Success isn't a place you arrive at. It's a path you build. And the tools you need aren't always there at the beginning. You have to create them as you go. That conversation changed my focus. I realized that instead of waiting for circumstances to be perfect, I had to start preparing with what I already had. I began to ask myself, what skills, habits, and resources do I need to move forward? What can I do today to prepare the path to the future I want to build? One of the first things I understood was the importance of small daily actions. We often underestimate the impact of what we do today, thinking that the future depends on big, decisive moments. But the truth is that success is built in the details, in those moments when you choose to be disciplined, learn something new, or take a small but constant step toward your goals. I remember once reading about a sculptor who spent entire days polishing small imperfections in his works. When someone asked him why he dedicated so much time to details that no one would notice, he replied, "I notice them, and that makes all the difference." That phrase was etched in my mind. It made me realize that preparation isn't always visible to others, but it's essential for the final result. On this path of preparation, I also discovered the importance of mindset. We often face challenges not because we lack skills, but because we doubt ourselves. Changing that internal narrative, learning to trust in your ability to adapt and overcome obstacles, is one of the most powerful tools you can build. One day, while reflecting on this, I remembered a conversation I had with someone I deeply admired. I asked him how he handled moments of uncertainty, and his response was simple, but transformative. I don't wait for things to be easy. I prepare my mind to face them no matter what. That mindset became a compass for me. I began to work on my resilience, on my ability to stay focused even when circumstances seemed to be against me. Now, as I write these words, what tools are you building today for the future you desire? What small steps can you take now to prepare the path you want to walk? Maybe you don't have all the answers at this moment, and that's okay. The process of preparation isn't about having everything figured out, but about moving forward with intention, building on what you have and being willing to learn along the way. Preparation doesn't guarantee that the path will be easy, but it gives you the confidence to face it with strength and purpose. Every tool you build, every skill you develop, every lesson you learn becomes a fundamental piece of your journey. The future isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's waiting for you to start. What can you do today to prepare your path? What decisions, however small, will bring you closer to the life you want to build? Because in the end, preparation isn't just an act of anticipation. It's an act of faith in what you can become. Are you ready to start? Influence of spirituality on decision? McKingway, remember a time in my life when I made decisions based solely on logic. It was a mechanical exercise, analyzing the pros and cons, weighing options, calculating risks. In many cases, those decisions led me to success, but over time I began to notice something unsettling. Although I was reaching the goals I had set for myself, I felt that something was missing. Why don't I feel satisfied with these choices? I asked myself one night while reflecting on the paths I had taken. It was in the midst of that search that I discovered a completely different approach. I began to consider an element I had ignored for a long time: spirituality, not as an abstract concept, but as an internal compass. A connection to something bigger than myself that could guide my decisions toward a deeper purpose. The turning point came during a conversation with someone I had always admired for their clarity and inner peace. I asked him how he managed to make important decisions without losing that serenity. His response left me thinking for days. I don't just trust my mind. I also listen to my soul. My decisions shouldn't just be correct. They must be aligned with who I am and what I believe. That phrase led me to rethink everything. I realized that many times I had ignored my intuition. It's that inner whisper that told me if something was really the right thing to do. I had made decisions that seemed right on paper, but didn't resonate with my essence. So I began to ask myself, how would my decisions change if I made space for spiritual guidance? Incorporating spirituality into my decision-making process was not an immediate change. It was a process of learning, of trial and error. I began to pay more attention to how I felt about each option, not just what seemed logical. I discovered that the best decisions were not always the easiest or the fastest, but those that made me feel at peace, even if they required more effort or patience. A clear example occurred when I was faced with the opportunity to work on a project that promised great rewards but went against some of my deepest values. Logic told me to accept. The numbers were convincing, but something inside me was not at peace. I decided to reject it, despite the doubts and the fear of losing the opportunity. Months later, a much more aligned alternative with my principles appeared, confirming that I had made the right decision. What I learned in that process is that spirituality is not separate from logic. Both can coexist and complement each other. Logic helps you analyze the facts, but spirituality guides you toward what has a deeper purpose. It's like a light that illuminates the path, showing you not only where you can go, but where you really should be. I often wonder, how do I know if a decision is in alignment with my spirituality? The answer, although not always immediate, usually comes when I pause, when I stop looking for answers outside and allow myself to listen to what my inner self has to say. I discovered that decisions based on spirituality often bring a sense of peace, even if they involve risks or uncertainty. I also understood that spirituality doesn't mean perfection. There will be times when we make wrong decisions, and that's okay. Those experiences are also part of learning and growth. The key is to reflect on them, to look for the lessons that can guide us toward wiser choices in the future. I remember a time when I made a rushed decision, ignoring the internal signals that told me to wait. The result was not what I expected. But that experience taught me not to rush, to trust that the right time always comes when you are in tune with your purpose. What role does spirituality play in your decisions? How can you incorporate that internal guidance into the key moments of your life? Maybe you don't have all the answers now, and that's okay. Spirituality isn't always clear or immediate. Often a process, a constant practice of listening, trusting, and adjusting course when necessary. Every decision you make is an opportunity to grow, to align yourself with something bigger than yourself. When you allow spirituality to be part of that process, you discover that decisions not only make sense, but also have meaning. What important decision are you facing now? How can you use your spiritual connection to guide you? Perhaps by doing so, you will find not only the answer, but also the peace you are looking for, the value of seasons, abundance, and scarcity there. Was a time in my life when I seemed to be always running after something more success, more resources, more recognition. It was as if time were against me, and every lost opportunity was a closed door forever. But then a season of scarcity came that stopped me dead in my tracks. It wasn't something I planned, and it certainly wasn't something I wanted. But over time, I realized that it was exactly what I needed, in that period of apparent emptiness. I began to see my life as a field that had been sown and harvested over and over again without rest. Without realizing it, I was demanding constant results, forgetting that even the most fertile land needs time to recover, to regenerate. How many times have I ignored the value of seasons because I was too focused on the immediate fruits? I asked myself one night while reflecting. It was during that time of scarcity that I learned one of the most important lessons. Life moves in cycles. Each season has a purpose. There are times for sowing, times for harvesting, and times for asterisk to wait. But what makes the difference isn't what happens in each season, but how you choose to respond to it. I remember a conversation I had with a farmer while traveling through the countryside. I asked him how he handled the years when the harvest wasn't abundant. He looked at me with impressive calm and said, "Those are the years that teach me the most. They force me to look more closely at the land, to better understand." That answer made me reflect deeply on life. We often see scarcity as an enemy, as something we must avoid at all costs. But what if scarcity also had something to teach us? What if the moments when we feel we don't have enough are an invitation to appreciate what we already have and to prepare for what is to come? As I delved into this idea, I realized that abundance isn't just a matter of resources, but of perspective. During my moments of greatest material abundance, I often felt dissatisfied, as if something was always missing. But in moments of scarcity, when I learned to value the little I had, I discovered an inner wealth that didn't depend on external circumstances. Once, while going through one of those seasons of scarcity, a friend shared a phrase with me that I will never forget. Abundance is not measured by what you have, but by what you do with it. That idea completely changed the way I saw the world. I realized that even in moments when it seems we don't have enough, there are opportunities to grow, to learn, to share. The key is to recognize the purpose of each season and to adapt to what each one demands of you. In times of abundance, it's easy to fall into complacency or excess. But those moments are an opportunity to plant, to build something that will sustain you when scarcity comes. On the other hand, in moments of scarcity, instead of fighting against them, we can use them to simplify, to focus on the essential, to find strength in our resilience. One of the most transformative lessons I learned was that seasons are not permanent. Neither abundance nor scarcity lasts forever. And when you accept this truth, you find a peace that allows you to navigate both with grace and confidence. How can I honor the season I'm in now? What can I learn from it instead of resisting it? These questions have guided me in moments of uncertainty, reminding me that every stage of life has a purpose, even if I don't see it immediately. What season are you living in right now? What can you do today to make the most of what this season offers you? Maybe you are in a moment of abundance and can use it to plant something meaningful. Or maybe you are in a period of scarcity and have the opportunity to discover an inner strength you had never explored. Each season, however difficult or gratifying, prepares us for the next. Your key is to trust in the process, to accept that life doesn't always